of RAF personnel in an area 900 square metres in the middle of the Burmese jungle with Army and Americans held off the Japanese for 3 weeks, each morning having to clear the Japanese from out of their lines, and they held that field, and this is a battlefield, that, a battle honour that the RAF Regiment are rightly proud of. They were always up front, actually, RAF Regiment personnel. They were either directing aircraft for strikes or actually looking for airfields so that they could keep the momentum going for the ground forces, and that's what they did. Indeed, RAF Regiment personnel were almost some of the first people into Paris and into Brussels, nothing to do with the bars, I suspect. But in truth, they also took over something like 16 airfields in northwest Germany very, very quickly. Squadron leader Mark Hobden, actually, of the RAF Regiment, captured Grand Admiral Canaris, who was actually going to be Hitler's successor. And I knew Mark Hobden. He was my father's commanding officer at one stage. And it was a real honour to meet him. Skipping through, during the 1950s, the RAF Regiment, and this is kept quiet really, too quiet, the RAF Regiment operated a force called the Aden Protectorate Levies in a country which is now called Yemen, based in Aden, and my father and fellow officers and warrant officers and senior NCOs of the RAF Regiment actually operated in the Aden Protectorate Levy. They saw huge active service, so much so that at one stage the RAF Regiment were the most decorated regiment in the British service. Let me give you an example. On the 15th of June 1955, 100 Aden Protectorate personnel, mounted in 3 Land Rovers and 9 trucks, moved into a wadi south of Robat. Despite a little bit of sniping, the convoy got through to Fort Robat. It delivered its supplies to the people there and then turned to come back. They started back at 1:30 p.m. By then, Salam Ali Mawa, the local terrorist commander, by the way a Houthi, was ready for them. Within a few minutes, the force of 100 people was heavily engaged from the sheer slopes of the wadi. Almost immediately, a young British RAF Regiment officer was killed, so was an Arab soldier. Several others were wounded. Rodney Marshall, the wing commander, the commanding officer, ordered my father, a squadron leader, to evacuate the wounded. My father did that, took them down in a truck all the way down the wadi, about 2 miles. But then some retreating soldiers coming out of the wadi said, "There's no officers left. The commanding officer's dead." My father knew he had to go back into the ambush to get everyone out. Meanwhile, in Aden, there were signals coming back, and I, as a little boy, with my mother, was being told by the padre that my father was dead, because the story was all the officers have gone. What happened was that the senior Arab officer was killed, the commanding officer was killed. In total, 8 people were killed. Another 8 were wounded. My father received the Military Cross, so did posthumously Rodney Marshall, so too did the senior Arab officer. I will just read a little bit from the citation in the London Gazette about my father after he learnt the commanding officer had been killed. Squadron leader Stewart assumed command of the force and immediately organised a volunteer party. He led them back into the area, which was under heavy and accurate fire, in an attempt to recover the dead bodies and wounded. Unable to locate the dead body of the wing commander, he recovered a 3-ton vehicle which contained a dead guard and 1 tower deflated by rifle fire. He personally drove the damaged truck back under fire, twice stopping to pick up wounded. More casualties were inflicted during the return passage down the wadi. In all, there were 8 killed and 7 wounded. Having assumed command of the force, he moved it tactically to an emergency airstrip and organised the evacuation of the most seriously wounded. Sniping ensued during this evacuation. Hostile rifle and accurate fire was encountered. Now that is typical of the RAF Regiment. This is a force that is actually superb, outstandingly professional, and a joy to be with. And I often, every year, have dinner with them in the RAF Club. Now, more recently, the RAF Regiment, as I would be delighted to give way.
My honourable and gallant friend has made remarkable tribute to his father in the RAF Regiment. Will he allow me just to mention my step-grandfather, who fought in the First War with the RAFC and was then seconded to the fledgling Estonian Air Force to be their chief flying instructor for some years. When he died in the 1980s, he said to me his only regret was that 3 countries that he knew well, all 3 of the Baltic states, no longer existed. Times have changed, fortunately.
Well, I think it's a lovely time to remember our families and this, and can actually attune that with the history of the RAF. Can I just bring us up to date? In Afghanistan, in Iraq, 5 RAF Regiment personnel were killed. Actually, I was present when 3 of them were killed because I was doing a film, and I was cowering in a bathroom when the rockets came in, and 3 RAF Regiment personnel were killed. But 5 were killed in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and so were 5 more were killed in Afghanistan. So these people are actually right on the front line, and the RAF realises that. 3 military crosses were awarded in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's pretty good for that small number of squadrons. I hope I've highlighted, in the short time I've had, what a wonderful force the RAF Regiment are, how vital they are to this country, and particularly the Royal Air Force, and how they have a huge part in the future of the Royal Air Force. I will finish by congratulating the RAF Regiment. The RAF may be 100, but the RAF Regiment, such a crucial part of the RAF, are 76. Well done, the RAF Regiment.
Martin Whitfield. Yeah.